about the presentations that we have on Thursday. No? Okay, so if you want to ask something about it, or if you want to suggest something, well, we can do this after, maybe after this session. During the break, you can text me and ask me anything about the presentations, but it's on Thursday, no? Thursday. And just remember that we have only 5 groups, right? And so calculate the time for maybe 15 minutes each group, so that I think it's plenty of time. You know? And we have only 2 hours. And so if we do 15 minutes times 5 is like 75, 80 minutes. So it should be enough, no? Great. Okay. Okay, so we're going to continue and hopefully finish the study of these steps in creating and using classroom-based assessments. No, remember that we go from the top down. No, we have the intended consequences. No? Then we go to the decisions. No, decisions is what we saw last Thursday. No, this decisions are depend on the consequences that you have in mind, you know, the intended consequences. And then of course the decisions are related to the interpretations, no? Interpretations. And under the interpretations we have the records, no? The records. Okay. So just a little reminder, so you remember the process, no? The process. Great. Okay, for this purpose of studying Unit 6 or Chapter 6, Avi has created a document in PDF for the content of Unit 6 or Chapter 6. Chapter 6, okay, which in the book originally goes from page 59 to let me see that, 72, no? 72. Right. But if you, well, but if you're using this, I don't know if in the PDF is the same, maybe the pages are different. Yeah. But that's what we're going to do today. And hopefully, if we have time to see something about the records, no? Records. Assessment records. Right. Okay. Well, after all this, you know, what, for example, the content of Unit 8 is designing templates. Well, when the time comes of next week, you're going to see that templates are of utmost importance, no? To plan your assessments. And then after all that theoretical part, after that we would have creating language assessment tasks, no? Which is maybe the practical part where we are going to put into practice all this theory. No? So we have this week and next week of teoria, and then hopefully the week after the next is about practical examples. Practical examples. Yeah, so in this chapter, we're going to discuss claim 3. Now, remember that claim 1 is intended consequences, claim 2 is intended decisions, and so this is known, this number 3 is known as claim 3, no? Of an assessment use argument, which is about the interpretation of a student's language ability that you, as a test developer, as a teacher, want to get to, no? On the basis of the assessment. So what we want to know here is what we need to assess, no, what we should assess, and then how we should assess. And so basically it's an analysis of the language improvements, the language ability that you want your students to have at that particular moment. No? So I think it's a very sensible area, no? That you should take it, that you should give it lots of preparation and lots of thinking. No? So first we're going to discuss the questions, no? The questions, as in the other two claims, no? Claim 1 and claim 2. We divide this, no, for a better understanding, into questions, no? Okay, in this case, we're going to divide it in two parts. I mean, we're going to divide it in two big questions, and then each of these big questions has some subsequent questions, no? Right, and so the two big questions are, what should we assess? No? What should we assess? And Abby, to illustrate this better, can you open this file, share this file, and go to page 59, sorry, 59. It's the very first page of chapter 6, interpretations. What to assess and how to assess.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So, and I want you guys to think about this. No, for example, think about a recent quiz that you have prepared, or maybe one that you have to prepare for this week, next week. No, and think about, what should you assess? What can you tell me? Maybe you can explain a little bit about the content of the unit, and what part of the language ability you want them to improve. No, great. That is interpretations. Yeah. So if we go down, we're gonna have assessment development questions for claim 3. No? Yeah. That's it. Claim 3. So in stating claim 3, there are two sets of questions you need to answer. Now, this is the document, the part that we are reading now. No? Well, I suggest that if you are working in a cell phone, maybe you can have direct access to this document, because Avi sent us the link last week. And maybe you can open this link on a computer so you can see, you can have a better picture. No, you can on a computer screen, it's much bigger. Right, okay. So we have these two questions. Now, what should I assess? And you see that we have 3 sub-questions, no? And 2 of them have 2 separate questions, no? So what, for example, what information about my students' language ability do I need in order to make the intended decisions? And how will I identify this? So I want you to think about a recent quiz, assessment, test, como lo llamemos, that you have recently elaborated, or one that you want to administer this week, next week. So how do you know what language you need to assess?
In order to make then the decisions, right?
Yeah, well, in this case, we know that.
Okay. Well, in that case, I I consider, and according to what I read too, you need to take intended decisions once you have something that needs to be assessed. So, for example, writing skills. Writing is a productive skills. Therefore, it is something that can be easily evaluated. So one intended decision I can make is to assign my students a writing task. For example, write a paragraph about your vacations, something like that. And then I present them a rubric about what I need them to do in that writing. So in that way, I can assess what I need to get more information about them.
Yeah, but for example, but in the example that you're giving me, you're talking more about you're talking about the task and you're talking about the decisions. The way I see it is that you are you have designed this this quiz, llamémosle, this quiz, because you want them to improve some specific area of writing. For example, writing an essay or writing a paragraph. I don't know. I'm just maybe making this up. And so the task is, for example, write a paragraph about something, no, something interesting. Yeah, and well, the way I see it, for example, the intended consequences, comenzando desde arriba, no, is that you want them to improve their writing, no. For example, students will improve their writing, their understanding of the structure of a paragraph, and writing a personal paragraph, no? For example, that would be the intended consequence. And so, for example, the decision here, for example, you want to decide which students are ready, for example, to write a paragraph, and which students need more. They need more, maybe more. They need maybe a little tutoring. They need maybe more practice. No, you decide that. No, and so, comenzando de arriba, you have the consequence. Students will learn to write a paragraph, and they will understand the structure of a paragraph, and then un tipo de párrafo en particular. No, I'm just, giving a general example, because you want to make the decision of who is ready, who is not ready, because you're planning to give extra classes or extra tutoria or something, right? Okay, and so and then we go to the step below, which is the interpretations, no? The interpretations. And so that's when it's here that I ask you, for example, what information about the student's ability do you want or do you need to make the intended decision? Because you want to know who is ready and who is not ready, for the writing of the paragraph.
Exactly. Yeah, I want to know that's why I say I was gathering that information at the beginning.
Exactly. Right. So in this case, well, I don't know exactly what your class, what the content of your class is in regard with the writing ability, but you would have to be very specific, no? For example, no sé, escribir un párrafo descriptivo, for example, no? I'm just thinking, right? And so, because you need to be very consistent about this, because you're going to make a decision, right? And if you look at this, two subsequent questions, you have, how will I assure that this information is relevant to the intended decision? So in other words, you have to give them something consistent, ¿no? Una tarea que sea decidora, digamos, de que eso es lo que quiero desarrollar o quiero comprobar que ya pueden hacer, ¿no? And then will this information be sufficient to make the intended decision? So, I mean, are you giving them a complete task, something that is really an indicator, that's the word, an indicator of that particular language ability that you want them to assess, to improve, no?
Yeah, and
so what?
that's, yeah.
Yes.
Sorry for interrupting you. Yeah, that's why I said that I was going to use a rubric, you know, in order to
exactly
evaluate specific aspects, and it also helps. It's like a guideline for them
of
to
course.
follow. Yeah.
Great. Okay, good. But I think we are on the same path, no? We're on the same path. That's very, very important. Huh? Es que como vamos de atrás, o sea, de lo último para abajo, sometimes it's like it might get a little confusing, no? Right. Okay, so at this moment, what is important is that you establish exactly what areas of language, what abilities, hasta qué extensión, hasta qué punto, ¿no? Okay, to what degree the students can actually manage and master a language ability. No? It has to do with language ability, basically. We have two subsequent questions there. No? How will I assure that this information is relevant to the intended decisions? And will this information be sufficient to make the intended decisions? No? Something that we just discussed now. And then we have one more question with a sub-question. No? Where will this definition come from? What will be the source or sources of this information, of this definition? So you need to be very, very careful about it, what exactly it is that you want to assess, because you want to bring about some positive, some improvement in a particular language ability. So you have to be very specific here. No? For example, it's writing is the general, but then you see writing of a paragraph, and then, for example, knowing the structure of a paragraph, for example, using clearly, for example, or using correctly, for example, the details, for example, ¿no? Puede ser que en una lección anterior ya aprendieron what is this first sentence? What is the first sentence in a writing exercise? I forgot the word.
The topic.
The topic sentence, yeah. The topic sentence, yeah. So the topic sentence, no. For example, in a previous exercise, you did a lot of topic sentence, recognize the topic sentence, learn that the topic sentence should be meaningful, interesting, appealing for the writer, for the reader, no, and consistent with the rest of the paragraph. For example, eso ya aprendieron. And then in this particular lesson, you want them to identify what are the details, how many details are okay to put in a paragraph, no? And so you are more specific, no? Details, no? Details. How many details? Maybe 3, 4, and the details have to be related to the topic sentence, no? Because otherwise it's not a consistent paragraph, no? And so you want to have a clear interpretation that is the concept that they are going to handle during the assessment, no? Hay que ir a lo más específico. Yeah, the areas of language, no, ability. And then where will this definition come from? The source. And the last one, of course, here is how can I assure that this definition is meaningful to my students and other stakeholders. Okay. Maybe here we need to remember the stakeholders, no? Because you want to make decisions, no, that satisfy all stakeholders involved. No? For example, you, the student, and of course the other teachers, director, etc., etc. Right. And if you think about maybe in a more in a broader context, you know, with more stakeholders, maybe think about an institute or university where students are learning to write a paragraph, you know, and complete essays. Okay. And so you want to give them meaningful academic, meaningful instruction, so that the students can be, for example, students that graduate from this institute will be totally proficient in English, no? For example, in writing, in working in an office or something. And so you if that's the case, you might want to give it some consideration, no? Asegurarse, no? How can you be sure that this definition is meaningful, no, to your students and maybe to the rest of the institution or something, no? So, well, of course, it all depends on the kind of institution where you work. You know, if you're working only in primary, you don't have the involvement of other teachers, other schools. Es un poco menor, no? Right, but you need to take into consideration all these aspects. Yeah, and the second question is, how should I assess, no? How should I assess? And so, Hugo, would you read this section, please? And maybe let's see if we can relate it to your example, no?
How you should
Yes.
assess? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, let me check. It's in which page?
The second page, 60. How should I assess? It's on the screen also, if you can find it.
What do we need to assess? How should I assess? Yeah, number 2.
Yes, number 2, yes.
Okay, how should I assess? What kind of performance do I need to obtain from my students? What kinds of assessment tasks should I use? Where do I find tasks that I can use as a basis for developing assessment tasks? How can I assure that my interpretations of language ability will be generalizable? How can I assure that my interpretations of language ability will be impartial?
Partial, okay, good. Thank you very much. So let's think about your example, no, to illustrate. Yeah, the example where you said that you created a little a task, no, in writing, no, writing. You want them to write a paragraph, no, or you can refer exactly to what your task was, no. So in regard with the first question, what can you see? What kind of performance do I need to obtain from my students? But what kind of performance do you want, do you need to get from your students?
What can I understand for performance there?
Performance, que cómo hacen esa tarea, ¿no? Performance is the way you actually do the task, no? Sometimes it's oral, but here it's written, no? It's completely written.
Okay. For example, I can think of a cooperative writing technique, so my students can benefit from others in order to to help them, help each other, you know.
That would be a good example of the second question, ¿no? The second sub question. Cuando pregunta, what kinds of assessment tasks should I use? For example, if you have a lot of students and you know that some students are better, you can benefit from these better students and pair them up with the students that are not as good, no? And so that's a kind of assessment task that they are going to enjoy and they are going to benefit from, right? And what about the first question? What kind of performance do I need?
Performance. Say what kind of performance do I need to obtain from my students? Written performance, something like that.
In this case, written, no? Because I understand that the ultimate goal here is that your students learn to write, no?
Yeah.
For example, si a paragraph, essay, descriptive paragraph, opinion paragraph, etc. You name it, no? You name it. But I understand, for example, that you want your students to learn to write a complete and correct paragraph, no, or description or something. Depende del objetivo principal, no? I don't remember exactly when you first gave the example. Can you repeat that again, please?
What part of my example?
When you said that, when I asked you in the previous section to give an example of an assessment that you explain about the writing.
Yeah, it's a cooperative writing task.
Cooperative writing task.
Yeah. So
and
my students.
And what are they writing? Are they writing a paragraph?
Just as I said, it is just a paragraph.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. Entonces maybe the performance could be you want them to learn to write a complete paragraph using all the elements, no topic sentence, supporting sentences, and then maybe the closing sentence, no? Yeah. That can be, for example, and you won't stop, no, as a good teacher, you won't stop until they get it, no? Until they get it right. No? Right. And so that's the performance that you expect from them. Yeah. And then where do I find tasks? No, for example, well, you are a very resourceful teacher, no? So you can find tasks from the book, you can find tasks online. Hay un tipo de tarea en las que les da, I don't know what they call them, but the author gives you a sample paragraph, no? Les da un párrafo de ejemplo, and then in response you write one like it, no? One. And so you in that way you can, students can notice the structure, no? And so they replicate something, but something of their own creation, no? Creo que se llaman sample paragraphs, no? Sample paragraphs.
Sample paragraphs, yeah.
Sample paragraphs. That's something very useful, no? Right. Or you can have, for example, you can take real examples, no? Original paragraphs written by students in other countries or in the US or something. And so you can give them that and then say, well, students, you need to replicate, you need to do one paragraph like this, but referring to this topic. And so you give them also the sample. And so, and also online, you can find hundreds of ideas, no, for writing, and specifically for tasks, no, for developing assessment tasks. And then we have this, no, Hugo, can you analyze this one? How can you assure that your interpretations of language ability will be generalizable? Because because remember that one of the principles of assessment, you know, in the process is that the results should be generalizable, no? Is one of una de las premisas, no, of assessment is that the results should be generalizable. So how can you guarantee that?
First of all, as I said, using a rubric is important, not only as a way to measure my students' performance, but also as a way to provide them a guideline. So they follow the rubric and they say, oh, okay, I need to do this and not that. I need to write like this and not like that. Therefore, I can assure that they will internalize how a paragraph is written, you know.
Good. Very good, very good. Good. Yeah, and the last one, how can you assure that your interpretations of language ability will be impartial?
For example, you know, following the structure of the general structure of the paragraphs using the 8 sentences structure, and is a good way of being impartial, because I might not like what my students wrote, but if they have followed that structure, I cannot say that they do not know how to write. And therefore, I know that they have understood what is the main goal of the task.
Okay, good. Yeah, good. Yeah, okay, great.
Professor.
Yeah. So you see, yes.
Another thing could be that, for example, if you ask students for writing about a paragraph about, for example, drugs should be legalized, so we cannot, for example, if the student agrees, we cannot say that we cannot judge the student.
We can make judgments.
So that could be another way to avoid that we can, I don't know, if she or he agrees that drugs should be legalized, maybe I assessed that student in a bad way, something like that.
Great. Yeah, good. Great. Okay, so you see, you have already your own way of working things out, you know, when elaborating a quiz, llamémosle, no? So all you have to do is just now, maybe, for example, when you have your next, you're going to prepare your next quiz, think about these important 2 questions and sub-questions, no? Sub-questions. Remember that all this section is about, we're judging only language ability, yeah? Of course, we're not judging the knowledge of the world or how much the students agree or disagree with you or with the general classroom as such, no? We're just talking about language ability, no? And how this concept can be generalized. You know, the test that you elaborate should be one that if other teachers want to use it, they will see that it's impartial and generalizable, no? Containing something maybe neutral, no? Algo tal vez neutral, but meaningful and useful, no? For developing the language ability, no? So the ultimate goal here is developing the language ability, no? That students arrive at the mastery of this language ability en el nivel en el que estén, no? Great. Great. And so Great. How much more time do we have? We have like a few minutes. So when we finish this section, we're gonna have a break, and the next section will start at 6. No, I'll give you a break so you can read this and assimilate the concepts on your own, no? Because you need this time to read on your own. Okay, so of course, if you read this first paragraph after the questions, no, then you understand the dynamics here, no. For example, for the first question, no, about what you need to assess, you need to consider the intended decisions, no, that we specified in claim 2. So entonces partimos of the decisions that you ultimately want to make, okay, in order to have your interpretations. And of course, you need to establish clearly and plentifully the language ability that you need your students to arrive at. No?